Ever wondered what numbers say about your favorite entertainers? Let's break it down with stunning insights and visuals. Stick around, this tutorial is about to start. This project teaches you to analyze trends like performance metrics, audience preferences, and revenue insights. These skills apply to real world domains like marketing, media, and analytics, making you job ready for roles in data analysis. So, let's turn data into your spotlight. Entertainment businesses rely on data driven strategies in marketing and distribution, making this skill set valuable for multiple organizations. Moving on to the KPIs, first we have the total revenue, which shows the total money generated across all events. Then we also have the count of category, which shows the different number of entertainer types. Later on, we also have the total audience, which shows the total number of attendees across all events. Then we also have the number of performances, which shows the total number of events that were held. Also, we have the count of venue capacity, which shows or groups the venues based on specific capacity of their seating. Also, we have the average revenue per event, which shows the average money generated across all events. And we also have the average audience per event, which shows the average number of attendees in each event. Lastly, we have the top location ID, which shows the most popular venue based on audience preferences or on the total revenue generated. So, now let's get onto the demo of the project. So, by the end of this project, you will have this dashboard and you will have two reports, which is the overview and the detailed analysis report. So, let me just show you. Moving on, you have seen that these are the KPIs that we will be making. The total revenue which all the entertainers bought in. This is the count of category. For example, there can be various categories such as musician, dancer, magician, comedian, or whatever it is. And you can see the total audience that showed up on these events. And these are the number of performances that happened. You can also see the total revenue that each city generated. For example, if I just zoom in, let me just show you. For example, this is for Europe, and if you hover onto it, you can see in the city Jamestown in Europe country, this was the total revenue. And similarly, in East Sharon and there is Freemanville. So for different cities, this was the total revenue. And moving on, this is the total revenue by category, which shows the musician, dancer, magician, comedian revenue. So musicians bought in the highest revenue, and moving downwards, the actors bought in the lowest revenue. If I just select on one visualization, you will see that musicians were total revenue, and this was the total audience for their events, and these were the number of performances that happened. So you can just unselect your selection, and this is the scatter plot between the total audience and total revenue. For example, if my total audience was 20,000 and my revenue was around 4 million, then there were the highest of musicians and comedians which brought the most revenue by each event. Now, this is a slicer panel which shows the categories. For example, if I want to see for the category dancer, again, you can see, or maybe let us say for musician. For musician, actually, there is a slicer here, so it wouldn't show you for magician or maybe for dancer per se. It would only show you for musician and comedians. So let me just unselect my selection, and this is the event date slicer. So for example, if you want to see on a particular end date, which is 26 September, on 26 September, you can see that these were the number of performances. This was the total audience, and musicians generated 61 million of the total revenue on this particular date. So let me just clear my selections. And moving on to the second report of the page, you can see here that these are the entertainers' name, which is the Allen entertainer's name. For example, I want to see for Alex Burton what was the total revenue he gave in. So this is around 100% of the revenue he bought in. So let me just clear my selection. And for example, these are the top 10 locations by each by venue capacity. Like what were the top 10 locations that were very efficient in terms of utilizing the venue capacity. And then these are the total revenue and the total audience by each month. You can see in the peak March, this was the total revenue that was generated. And then in moving on, the lowest revenue generated was in the month of November. So you can see that people preferably want to come to the in the month of March, they want to attend more events and they help us to bring more revenues. And then this is the top location ID. Top location ID in terms of bringing the most highest revenue. There could be several factors as to why this location ID is most preferable. Maybe because the traffic around is less, or the environment, or there is a lot more safer environment around. That is why this is the location that brought in the highest revenue. And this is the average revenue per event. What was the total revenue, average revenue in each event, the audience that showed up for each event on an average basis, and this is the count of venue capacity. For example, for these were the total number of venues, and each venue had a particular venue capacity. So with this is the demo of the project. Now let's get into creating the actual reports. So starting by creating the first report of this project, we will be having two reports for this project, which is the enter data analysis dashboard. And what we are going to do is we are going to first import the data as always. Then we are going to make sure if there is any transformation that would be needed, we're going to transform the data. Sequentially, we are going to work upon the modeling task of the project, and then soon enough we'll be creating the reports or the dashboards. So let's start. First, as always, we are going to click on get data to get the data from a particular data source. I will click on text or CSV, and this is the three tables that I'll be working with. So I'll just import them one by one. We have the entertainers, locations, and the performance detail tables. Let me show you as soon as the preview appears. You can see here that for each entertainer, there is a particular entertainer ID, then the entertainer's name, the category in which they basically have, they make sure to entertain their audience, and the year in which they debuted. What was their first performance year? So now we will just click on load. Again, you can always transform your data and then load, but for now we are going to load the data. And now the rows have been loaded. Now again, we will click on get data and we will click on text or CSV and then locations. The locations table will contain the detail of in which places the concerts were being held or whatever the venues were in which each event was taking place. You can see there is a particular location ID for each of the locations, the cities in which the events were held, the country, and the venue capacity. For each venue, what were the total number of people that could be accumulated at a single place. So we'll again click on load. And again, the connection has been created. Now what you're going to do is, again, you're going to click on get data. You're going to click on text or CSV and then the performance details table. This is the actual fact table which contains the main data that we need to make sure that we'll be creating measures of and all. See, this is the event for each particular event, and there is the entertainer ID. Entertainer ID was also in the entertainers table, by which entertainer ID can be the mutual field. And then there is the location ID, which was earlier present in the locations table, then the event date, then the revenue each entertainer generated, and the count of audience that were present. So again, we're going to click on load. Now here you can have a look at the data pane that all of three tables have been successfully loaded. Now what we are going to do is, if there are any particular transformations, we can make sure to transform the data. We're going to click on transform data here in the home tab, and we're going to click on the transform data. Again, this opens the Power Query Editor, which is a powerful tool which helps us to transform our data. We can do a lot of things. We can tailor the data accordingly to our needs, whatever is it that we require. And if there are any inconsistencies in the data, it can also make sure to wipe them off. So you can see for the entertainer table, we would actually, the data is pretty much clean. So first we will just make sure that the field names are in the right format. Entertainer ID, and you'll edit this and you'll write it as entertainer name, the category, and the debut year. we're just going to leave a space between these two also. Moving on to the locations table. This is the location ID and we'll just leave some space here. The city, the country, and the venue capacity. Just make sure to leave a space here as well. Now, the data types also seem very consistent with according to the relevance of each field, so there is no problem. Moving on to the performance details table, make sure to leave a space in these field names also. Event ID, entertainer ID, location ID, event date, revenue, and the audience count. Now everything seems perfectly fine. Now you can just hit on the close and apply button and click here. And you have to wait actually also. Now all the necessary changes have been done and it is now waiting to make sure to display the updated tables after the changes that we have done. And now the task has been successfully completed. Now what we are going to do is we're going to go to the model view and we're going to see what modeling has Power BI already done for us, and if there is any significant changes that needs to be done, we will make sure. We will go back to the model view and we will have a look here. Performance details is actually the fact table, so let me just drag it all the way here in between. And you can see it forms a many-to-one relationship with the entertainers table on the basis of entertainer ID. One-to-many can be said here from dimension to the fact table, and many-to-one from the fact to the dimension table. Again, now the locations table forms a many-to-one or one-to-many relationship from here one-to-many and from here many-to-one. So they are based on the location ID. Location ID is the common field here. Now we are going to, so far there is no such problem and there is no common field also that we can again model this on. But for now we can just move back to the report view and now we can start creating the reports. Now what you are going to do is, first we will work on the canvas color, and then eventually we'll be including multiple visualizations and slices to make the report look more attractive and dynamic in nature. So what we are going to do is we're going to expand this visualization pane and then we're going to move to the format your report page. In the canvas background drop down, you can click here on the color and you can make sure to give a color to this. So for example, let me just go with color. I have a color code for a particular color I want to give. It is E6, E6, E6. And then yeah, and now you can see that there is a grayish sort of canvas color for this. Now what am I going to do is, let me just first minimize this a bit. Now I would insert a shape here first. I would insert a rectangle here and I'll make sure it moves down all the way here. This would be actually my slicer panel where I'll be including all the slices that I want. Now I will just click on the style drop down menu here in the shape part of this and I'm going to choose a color that would be plain white only for now. And what I can do is I can click on the shape drop down menu. This is a rectangle shape but I want its rounded corners up to like let's say 70. So if I just show you here, automatically there are some curves on the edges. But again, this has some borders which I don't like. So what am I going to do is I'm going to go on the style drop down menu and I'm going to switch off the border, or you can leave it as, but you can make sure it is white in color. So now this looks much better and you can also add some shadows if you want. Let's add some shadow to this. But we want a shadow of the color this only, which was the canvas color. Yeah, so now you can see that it looks much better. Now what you can do is, again, you can add a shape here. You can add another rectangle and you can just resize it. And you can leave some space between these. And you can drag this all the way here. And you can go to the shape section and you can make sure its rounded corners are up to, let's say, 70. And you can go to the style drop down menu and you can choose a color. For example, I want this dark purple color, so I'm going to go with this. I'm going to switch on my shadow, but my shadow should be something in this color, which was already that was chosen for the canvas color. And then what else I can do? If I want to add some borders, I can also add borders, but in the same color, because that would look more consistent throughout. And if you want glow also, you can add the glow. You can choose a color if you want the glow for. For example, if I show you this, it would have actually no significant impact as such. But yeah, that's just an idea. So now this looks good overall. Now what we are going to do is we would need some KPIs that are essential for this table. So what we are going to do is we're going to go on the home tab. We're going to click on the new measures in the calculation section. First, I want to create a measure of the total revenue. So I'm just going to write it as total revenue is equal to sum of performance details revenue, and I'll just hit enter. So this will sum up the total revenue for each of the events that took place and you will get the total revenue eventually. Now again, I'm going to click a new measure. I'm going to create some measures and just make sure to have a look at it. And I want to see the total audience also for each event that showed up. So I'm just going to total the event audience also. So let me just see performance details, audience count, and I'm just going to hit enter. Now again, a new measure. And I want to see the number of performances also that took place. Number of performances eventually means the number of events that took place, and obviously there would be a number of performances also. So let us see the count of this. Count of the events that took place. Count if we count the event ID, that would give us the total number of performances, because for each event there were the number of performances that took place. So we will definitely count it. And I'm going to hit enter. With this, you get the number of performances also. Now what you're going to do is, first, we want a title for this report. So what we are going to do is we're going to add a text box here. Let me just minimize the text box. And I'm going to type it as, let me just zoom in for you. Entertainer data analysis. And I'm just going to select this. And I'm going to make this in the Calibri. I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to make sure its font size is bigger. And I want it centrally aligned. And I want the font color to be white. I will just drag this all the way over here. Let me just zoom out for you. For now, it is not visible, obviously, because the font color was also white and the background this text box has is also white. So what am I going to do is, I'm going to go in the effects section in the format text box. It will automatically load. So I want a color which is this color only, so that it is visible. And now you can just drag this all the way over here. So now this looks much better. It is centrally aligned also. So after this, what you can do is you can now create cards for the KPIs that we have made so far. So we're going to just click a card here. And again, let me just resize this. And I want its size to be much smaller. Now I want to see the total revenue. So I will just drag this all the way over here. And you can see the total revenue. Now what you can do is, let me create another card also. Let me just make sure to resize it because that is also very important. I want to see the count of categories, the number of categories or the number of genres basically each event took place. Like there could basically be, for example, there is music, there is comedy, there is acting or theater. All these are some particular categories also. I don't want to see the first category, I want to see the count of categories. So there are 5 categories of different type of entertainers which performed on each events. Now again, what am I going to do is, I'm going to drag another card and I'm just going to resize it, and I'm going to drag the total audience field in the section here, and you can see the total audience. And let me just resize this. Now I'm interested in seeing the number of performance, but wait. And I'll again choose a card here and I'll drag this all the way here and I'll just resize this, and number of performances will be dragged down in this field section, and you can see the number of performances which were around 1200, and just drag this all the way over here, and you can see the KPIs for this page. Now what you can do is you can make sure to edit these KPIs also. For example, my call out value looks nice, but you can make this in bold also if you want. Let me just do that. And you can make this also bold. Now what you can do is you can change the font type also. I'll suggest that at least. And you can just resize this. Let's keep it till 35 for example. And similarly, let us just make one change in one card and eventually we can just format paint it for other cards also. So let me just make some changes. The category label, which is the number of performances here, you can change the color of this to complete black and you can make it an Arial. And now it looks fine. You can also make this bold if you want, but okay, let's just leave it for now. And go to the general section of this, go to the effects drop down, and I want a visual border. Okay, let's go for a visual border here and choose something like this color, which is the canvas color already, and let's round it up to like 14 pixels. Let me just drag this for you. And what you can do is you can also add some shadow. Go to the general section again, go to the effects drop down, and you can see the shadow here. You can add some shadow also to this, and we will choose the canvas color for the shadow only. Now you can just format paint it for others. And now you see that your cards seem to pop in a much better manner. So these are the cards that we have made. Now we are going to work upon the visualizations. Now the first visualization that I'm going to create is the total revenue by city. So for this I'm going to need a map. In the visualization section, this is the map and you can choose here and it will automatically appear. Let me just zoom out. Mm, and let me just zoom this in at least. Mm, and you can just resize it first. Now we are going to need the total revenue by city. So what am I going to do is I'm going to drag the location from by in the locations table there is a city field. So you will drag it all the way to the location so that it can detect the city, and we want the total revenue, right? So we will just drag this all the way here in the legend section. Oh, sorry, actually we will drag this in the bubble size. So that will basically, this will show you that total revenue by each city. You can see that, for example, if I just zoom in, you can see in the city Nicholstown, this was the total revenue. And similarly, for Jamestown, this was the total revenue if you just hover onto it. So you can again zoom out by just by the help of your mouse. And what else you can do is you can edit this similarly. You will just go here in the format visual pane. You will click on general. Your title seems to be fine, but you can again change the font of this. You can make it bolder. You can align it. You can make sure the font size is consistent. Let's say, okay, let's just keep it this only. And what else you can do is you can add some shadow if you want. I want the text color to be black only. And move all the way down to the effects drop down. And the color of the background is fine. We don't need another color. And what we can do is for the visual border, we can just keep it white only. And we're going to choose rounded corners as 14 pixels. I want a shadow, but I wanted to align it with the canvas color that I've chosen. So I'll just do that. And everything seems fine, but you can change the bubble colors also. So these are the bubbles in the visual section. You can see the bubbles drop down menu. You can change the color also. This is the default color, but I'm going to go with something darker orange. So now this looks better. And again, see, if you want to work with by changing the map settings, you can make sure there are different styles. For example, this is currently the road by default. You can go for Arial also. Arial is something darker, I'll say. Then there is dark. Then there is light also. So we're going to go with light only for now. Now what we are going to do is now we want the total revenue by each category. For this, I'm going to go with a stacked bar chart. And let me just resize this all the way. And let me just wait. Now I want to see the total revenue by each category. So what am I going to do is I'm going to drag this all the way to the y-axis. Sorry, to the x-axis actually. If this is a bar chart, if this was a column chart, then we would have dragged it to the y-axis. But for now, this measure that I have made, total revenue, will be dragged all the way to the x-axis. And for each category, I will drag it all the way to the y-axis. Now you can see, if you hover onto it, you can just similarly see that for musician, this was the total revenue, then the dancers, then magician, comedian, actor. And for example, if you want to see it in a, let's say, ascending order, for now this is by default descending. So if I want it in ascending, you can see that, okay, for actor, the genre, or the people who are in the acting industry, or the basically the entertainers who are in the acting industry, or the artists, they generated the lowest revenue, and musicians generated the highest revenue. So again, you can sort this axis. You will just simply right click on the visualization of this three button, and you will just click on sort descending again back to normal. Now you will select this, you will click on format paint, which would actually make sure your task is, you don't have to do much of the work, and you will see that, okay, the bar colors, everything has been influenced. Now you will go back to the format visual section and you will make sure that your x-axis values are much visible. So choose a color first, go for black, I'll say. Go for the font type as Arial, make it bolder, and you can just let me just zoom out for a while. Okay, now what you can do is, once you're done, you can edit the x-axis title also. So again, choose a font, go with the bold type and change the color back to black, and you will, or you can not make it bold. Now what you can do is, now you will go to the y-axis and you're going to make sure that the values are appearable. So we're going to choose the color. Now we will choose Arial as my font type, and I want this in bold, and I'll just, and the category can be left like this only, but what we can do is we can just work on the font type, and we will increase the size also. Now for the bars of the color, we can choose a different color. This is the color and we can go with something light, I'll say. So now this also looks much better. Now you can add some data labels also if you want. That automatically gives you some labels also. Make sure that the values are actually visible also, I'll say. And go for something in Arial. And you can increase the size. And you can make sure the grid lines are also off because now it is currently on. Now this looks much better. Now if you can hover, you can see here that musician, then dancer, and then each of these generated revenue in the descending order with the highest to the lowest. Now once you're done with this visualization, we will make another one, which is by creating a scatter plot to compare the total revenue and the total audience by the event ID and the category. So let me just make sure there is a scatter plot. Now once I have dragged it all the way over here, let me just minimize, let me just resize this. Now what we are going to do is, in the x-axis, I am going to drag the total audience, and the y-axis total revenue. In the legend category, in the size, I will drag the count of event ID, and in the value section, I will drag the event ID. Now what we can do is we can add a filter. For example, I want to compare the total audience and total revenue among two categories only, which is the comedians and musicians. So this is the filter pane, and I can click here on the drop down menu of category, and I can choose only for comedian as well as musician, and that is it. So what else you can do is, let me just make some changes and then I'll explain you also. This bubble size is actually very large, or the markers. So you can go on the markers drop down menu and you can make sure its size is a bit minimized. Okay, for example, if I go all the way down here, it will actually increase the size. But if I go for something small, let me just go. So now they look much better. Now what you can do is, first let me just format paint it from here, and I will click on format paint and I will click here. So now they look much better. And what you can do is, legends will be dragged all the way to the bottom center position, and make sure that the text is also appearable. You'll choose a black color, Now it's visible, and now this is also fine. You can just switch off the title for the legends. Now you can see that when the total number of audience was around 20,000 and the revenue was around, let us say, let me just see if I can show you also. If my total revenue was around 4 millions and my total audience was around 20,000, the most highest were the comedians and musicians. Like this was the comparison among the total audience and the total revenue when the combination was with a 20,000 audience and 4 lakh revenue. The highest were the comedians and musicians. Similarly, and as soon as the audience increased, there was not much of revenue for the comedians and musicians as well. That was generated by these two entertainer industry peoples. Now, what you can do is you can change the color of these markers also. And for example, for let's say comedians, I want a color which is darker, so I'll go with something dark orange. And then maybe for musician, I will go with a color which is lighter in orange color. So now you can see that this looks much better also. So this is basically, let me just, okay. So this is the comparison among the total audience when there was a combination of total audience as 20,000 and the revenue was around 4 lakhs. Many of the musicians and comedians were highly active. But as soon as the audience led to 35,000 people and revenue was around 6 lakh, the count of musicians and comedians generating the total revenue was much lower. So now what we can do is I can work something up with the slicer panel also. So let us say we're going to add some images also to make it look much better. So I will click on the insert tab and I will add an image. And maybe this is the logo, for example. Let me just see. Okay. So this is nothing. This is just a logo showing the star metrics because we are creating a report. So I thought this would look much better. So let me just resize it. And I will drag this. And let me just drag this all the way to the hair. Actually, it's not also. So let me just drag this all the way here in the center. Now what you can do is you can add a category slicer for this. So I will add a slicer here and I will drag the category field to here and I want this in the tile format. So I will go to the slicer settings drop down in the visual pane of the visualization section and I want a tile. So I will go with these tiles. So let me just drag this all the way down. Now this looks much better and you can just drag this all the way over here and let me just resize this and you will just drag this all the way over here. So now this looks much better and you just drag this a bit above, I'll say. So now for this category, what you can do is you can do some settings with the slicer here. The slicer category seems fine, but you can change the font type also in the slicer header drop down menu. You can choose the font color to be this, or maybe let us see if something purple works with this. Okay, now this looks much better, I'll say. And maybe let's go for something Calibri for the slicer, I'll say. And what you can do is, and for the values, what you can do is, you can make sure these are in black color. And I will go for a Calibri font type here. And I will make these bold so that they are visible. I want a background color also for these. So I will go with something light purple, I'll say. Actually, this purple is very dark. So I'll go with something lighter also. Let me just drag this all the way over here. Okay, now this looks much visible also. And now you can see, so now you will be able to see the categories, and if you want a particular category to be chosen from, you can choose a category also. Now we will add another slicer here, and I want the event date as my slicer, so I will drag this from the performance details table to here. And let me just again resize this also. And what you will do is you will drag this, and you're just going to click here, and you can make some changes already by clicking on the format painter, and you will click here. I think what you can do is you can just make manually changes, because format paint here doesn't seem to work for now. So you can just change the values also. Good. You can choose a font type. If you want Arial, you can go for Arial. If you want Calibri, you can go for Calibri as well. And I will just make these bold so that these are visible. My slider should also be visible, so I will choose a color which is darker. Now general I'll go, and the title already is there, so I don't need to work with the title, I'll say. You can choose a background also if you want for the values. I can use something. I'll choose this color, but again I want something lighter also. So I'll just drag this all the way over here. And now this looks much better. So if I just unselect it, so you have many slices. You have the event date slicer, you have the category slicer also. Now you can add an image also if you want. Okay, so we'll click on insert tab, and we will click on image. And let's say I'll choose this maybe. So I will just, this shows the entertainer, something related to the entertainer data analysis context. So I used this, and let me just resize this. So now this is the first page of the report or the dashboard that you have created. Simultaneously, we'll be creating another report as well. So let's move on with it. Now we will select this, and this is the new page where you will be creating the another report. So moving on to creating the second page of the second report, or the second page of this report. What am I going to do is this bar and this title, all I'm going to do just simply copy paste the shapes and all. So let me just show you first. Let me just make sure my canvas color is consistent for this one page also. So I'll choose the color again. And what was the color that I went with? So let me just make sure my transparency is to 0. Okay. So now what am I going to do is I'm going to go back to page 1, and I'm just going to copy paste this shape. I'll just control plus C, I'll just hit on my keyboard, and similarly you can also do this, and I'll just paste this. So the bar is already here, and what am I going to do is I'm going to do something similar. I'm going back to my first report, and I'm just going to paste this shape also in my next page. I'll hit the copy first, and then I'll just paste this shape also. So now it is already there, and now everything seems fine also. Now again, you will just simply, you can also copy the title for this, and for example, I'll just again, some of the elements I can copy so that my time is also not much used further. I think it actually copied the shape only. Let me just remove this first, and I'll go back to page 1, and maybe I can just simply copy this, and I'll paste it. Maybe it's not working, though I can't actually, I guess, copy the text box. Okay, so we can either manually add a text box only. So let me just resize this text box first, and I will write it as again entertainer data analysis, and I'll just copy this, and I will choose a format which was consistently used, Calibri, and then I'll choose a font size which is 28, and I'll go with bold, and I will just drag this all the way here in the center, I'll say, and then I will go to the effects section here, and then I will choose a color of the background which is this only. But again, the text is in black, so let me just make sure I will select the text here, and I will choose a font color which is white. So now you can see that okay, my font is also consistent throughout. Now what I can do is I can actually copy this image also. So I'll just click here, I'll copy this, and I'll paste this to my next report. So now it is there. So I'll just keep it here. Now moving on, I will create further more KPIs which are needed for this project. So I'm just going to click on the card here, and let me just minimize this. Now, what am I going to do is first, let me just make some of the new measures that I have thought of. So I will just click on new measure here. I want the average audience. I want to see the average audience per event. So what am I going to do is I am going to divide the measure that I already created, which was the total audience divided by number of performances. So this will give you the average audience per event that showed up. And if you see, let me just zoom in for you. If you see in the entertainers table, I have got this average audience per event as my new measure. So let us just create another new measure also. Some of the KPIs which are highly needed. So let me just zoom in also if you want. Average, I want to see the average revenue generated per event. So I am going to divide my total revenue by number of performances, and I'm going to hit enter. And let me, if I just zoom out, you can see here in the average revenue per event, you have gotten this as your measure. So again, let's just zoom out and create another new measure. I want to see the top location ID in terms of which generated the highest revenue. So what am I going to do is, first I'm going to use a max function. Let me just write the DAX expression first, and then I will explain you. But let me just tell you a gist of this. Actually, I want the max one. Yeah. The max function basically iterates from row to row depending on a particular condition and obtains the highest value based on a particular condition only. So max and then top n. The top n will give me the top one or the top two, whatever you want value, nth value. So I want a top one value which will basically give me based on what particular condition. So I want a top n value, and then I will use the summarize function. Summarize function basically creates a temporary table depending on a particular condition. So for example, I want to create a temporary table from the performance details table based on performance details location ID. So basically a temporary table will be created which will contain unique location IDs for each location. So I will just first close the summarize option here, and then I will click the total revenue. So the top end function will give me the top one value which are the highest total revenue, but in descending order. So that is how I will get the highest total revenue. I will again close the brackets for this one, and then I will write as performance is location ID. For then the max function will iterate row by row to see the unique location ID which had the highest total revenue. So again I will close this bracket and I'll hit enter. With a measure here of the top location ID as well. So now what we are going to do is we are going to select this first, and now we want the count of venue capacity. So what am I going to do is I'm going to click on locations and I'm going to drag this field till here in the field section, and you will see that this was the total count of venue capacity. And then what am I going to do is, let me just zoom out for you. These were the total number of venues, and each venue must have a particular capacity also. So now what am I going to do is I'm going to again choose another card. I'm going to drag this all the way over here, and I'm just going to minimize this also. And I want to see the average audience per event. This is my average audience per event. Then I want to choose another card, and I want to see the average revenue per event. And I will just drag this all the way over here, or maybe here. Now another card, I will choose a card here, and I will drag this, minimize it, and I will bring it all the way over here, and I'll just, so now you can see another cards also. And I will drag the top location ID in this. So this was the top location ID in terms of generating the highest revenue, which means preferably that most of the events were held in this particular location ID, because there must be some factors that are associating by giving it the highest revenue. Why? There could be something like there is less traffic around that particular location ID, or maybe the environment is good that people are preferring to come to this location to attend such functions. So what am I going to do is, again I'm going to just go to page 1, and I'm just going to choose this card for example, and I'm going to just click on format paint, and I'll go back to the page 2, and I'll just, so now you can see that with minimal effort I was able to just simply edit this card. And again I will choose a format paint, and I'll do this similarly for these ones, and again format paint it, and you can just click here, and again if you format paint it you will have another card which is completely edited. So now once you're done by creating the KPIs of this, now we will move on to the visualizations. So for example, I want to see the venue capacity utilization for each location ID. So what am I going to do is, I'm going to create a measure which is the venue capacity utilization. So I'll click on new measure here, and soon the formula pane will appear for the creation of the measure. Venue, let me just, venue capacity utilization. Let me just make it an venue capacity utilization, and you will do is you're going to divide the total audience by sum of locations venue capacity, and you're going to just hit enter. And once you're done with it, and what you can do is we can again create a bar chart for this, or you can also go for column charts. But again, I'm just going to go with a bar chart, stack bar chart, and then I'm just going to drag it all the way over here. And I'll just minimize this. And I want to see the top 10, basically the top 10 location IDs which efficiently use the venue capacity, for example. So what am I going to do is I'm going to drag the location ID on the y-axis and the venue capacity utilization to the x-axis, and you can see subsequently. But what am I going to do is I want only top 10 locations. So I'll just click on basic filtering, then click on top here. I want top 10 by what? By the venue capacity utilization, by what value? So I'll just click on apply filter, and you will get the top 10 locations which utilize the venue capacity in a much more efficient manner as well. So I will just make some necessary changes. What I can do is I can go back to page 1 and the stacked bar chart which I created here, for example, I can just simply format paint it. So I'll just choose this and I'll click on format paint and I'll go to my page 2 and I can just click here and see, with less effort everything has been taken care of. But what am I going to do is I'm going to go to the general section and I'm going to change the title. Top 10 location ID by venue capacity utilization. And the data labels are also a lot in bigger font size. So I'm just going to make sure my data labels are actually in a much more smaller size. So I'll just go to the value drop down menu here and I'll just make sure these are in a much more smaller. If you want, you can make these bold also and go for Calibri, I'll say this time. And again, you can just increase the size now. Now it does look much better. So with this, you have created your first visualization for this page. And again, now we will go with a donut chart to show the top 5 entertainers' name by the total revenue they generated. So I will basically visualize here that who were the top 5 entertainers which brought in the highest revenue. So I'll just resize this. And let me just make sure. So let me just select the visualization, and what am I going to do is I'm going to drag the names, entertainer name, to my legend section. Actually, for now there are a lot, but let us just wait, and total revenue to the value section. Right now these are a lot, right? So they don't look good. So what am I going to do is I want just top 5 entertainers. So I will click on filter type and I will choose a top end filter and I will go with top 5 who bought in the most revenue. So I will add the buy value section and I will apply my filter. So now you can easily see that basically, for example, here, this is Joe's Hill. If you hover onto it, you can see she bought in most of the revenue, which was around 22% of the revenue. Then subsequently, these are for each of the top 5 entertainers. So again, you can make some changes here. Firstly, for the you can go to the detail labels drop down menu in the visual section, and I want the label contents as the category and the percent of total they contributed in the revenue. So I will again click on values drop down and I will choose a color which is black. and I want them in the Arial format. If you want bold, you can always go with bold, but let us just leave it for now, I'll say. And you can just click here. Okay, let us not just make sure we'll do it by ourselves. Let us just format paint it from this visualization first. And what else you can do is, you can now, since you have the name and the revenue they contributed to, you can simply switch off the legends. So I'll just switch off the legends here, and I can make sure my slices look good. So for Joe's Hill, I'll go with this color. Then for Melissa Rose, I can go with this color. And then I can go with something like, I will go with another color, something lighter. And then I can choose for autumn, I can choose this. And then for Joseph, I can go with this. Okay, so now this looks much better. I can create another visualization as well. I want to see the total revenue and the total audience by each month, so that it depends on seasonal factors. For example, if my total revenue is highest in the month of December or maybe January, this basically means that people prefer to attend such events in the cold winters. And so what we can do is, now we want to see a seasonality trend by each month. So for that we will need a line chart. So I'll just choose a line chart here. And now we have a line chart. Now I want to see the total revenue and the total audience. So I will, okay. So I will choose a total revenue in the x-axis. Sorry, the total revenue in the y-axis. The total audience in the actually secondary y-axis. And for month, I can extract it from the event date by the date hierarchy. So I will just drag this all the way to the x-axis. And I don't want the day, I don't want the quarter, I don't want the year as well. I just want my month. So now you have gotten this. So let us just format paint all the necessary changes first. Now what you can do is, you can just work with the x and y axis titles because they don't look as much as they should. So go to the x axis drop down, choose a color which is black in color, choose something in Arial, I'll say font type, and you can again make these bold if you want to. So now they look also much better. Now switch off the grid lines, I'll suggest, and for y and move to the y axis drop down, and for the values you can make these in bolder and go with the Arial format. Just make it bold. And the title seems fine for both x-axis and y-axis, but these lines are actually not very much great in terms of the data. So let us switch off data labels for now, and let us switch on markers for all the series. For total revenue, actually let us make changes for all only. So now the markers are also visible, and you can choose a color, but before that we want the line colors to be different. So for example, if I want to see for total revenue, I want the color to be orange, something this. And then if I want something for total audience, I can choose a different color, which is lighter orange something. So now this also looks much better. And for the secondary y-axis, also make sure to do the changes necessary for the values. Go to the values drop down in the secondary axis one, and you can choose the font type. You can make this bold, and you can choose a color. Now they look much better, but what you can do is, okay, you can have some detail labels. I'll not, you can switch on the data labels, but make sure to change some settings also to this. Value, go to the value section and just make sure the size is small. So now this looks much better. So you can see here that for the month of May, the highest peak was the total revenue which generated, but the total audience was this. And similarly, there was a downgrade in the total revenue and audience in terms of November, but again it peaked up to December. So people preferably like to attend, preferably March and in December in the month of cold ones. So for now, these are the visualizations that we have created for this page. Now we will be working with this slicer pane that I want to work with. So I want a slicer of the entertainer names. I will just drag this field from the entertainers and I will go to the visualizations format visual section and I want my slicer settings and I want a tile for this. And let me just drag this all the way over here. And you can just again minimize this. So with this, you have gotten the entertainer name. And what you can do is you can also add a city if you want. So let us just first bring this downwards. And we will add another slicer. What you can do is you can go to the page 1 and you can click on this and you can just simply choose format paint and you can work with the another slicer. Automatically the changes will be done. So you can just do this and now most of your work has been taken care of. Now what you can do is you can make another slicer also and you can choose the city here. And what you can do is you can go to the slicer settings in the visual section and you can click on drop down and you can just drag it all the way over here and you can just make sure it's completely aligned and go to the value section. You can choose Arial and you can choose the font color as black and you can make it bold and you can choose a background color also. So we will go with something purplish, but what we're going to do is we are going to need a lighter much shade of purple, or maybe this I'll say. So now this also looks, so far it looks great. Now what you can do is you can also add another image if you want. You can go to the insert section and you can add an image from here and you can go to the wherever you have stored those images, you can go there also. Go to the images section. Okay, for example, for now, if there are no images, what you can do is you can insert the same image. I'll prefer go with the logo image that I have already had. Actually, not this one. I want the another image. So I'll go back to the image and I'll choose the image which I want. And I'll choose a slicer logo again, which is this one. And now, so now this is the second page report also that has been created by us. And if you just go back to the page 1, this is the another report that has been created. So these are the 2 pages report that so far we have created. And if you want to name the pages also, you can do that. So you can just double click here and you can write it as overview. And you can again click on page 2 and you can rename this as detailed analysis. So with this, you have created the 2 of the reports which were significant. And this is the overview and this is the detailed analysis that we have created. Also, make sure to save your work. So what we are going to do is you're going to click here on the save option. They want to know the name of the file that you'll be keeping. So I will keep it as entertainer data analysis and I'll just hit on save. So you can see above that there is the file name and it has been successfully saved. Thank you for sticking with me to the end of this video. If you like our tutorial, please make sure to like, share and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.